I had you working 2 or 3 different nights, and I had you the day you're supposed to be gone, I had you here, and the day you're supposed to be here, I had you gone. I guess we're going to go out in April the same way we came in because I didn't have you being here tonight. Am I? All right. Well, good. Because I thought if I had April wrong, if I've had April wrong the whole month, I don't know. So if Jimmy's here Sunday, he's singing, preaching, teaching, reading, and saying the closing prayers. So I'm just going to put his name down for the whole deal. So I don't know, before we get into it, I don't know how many of you all last month during the NCAA basketball tournament filled out a tournament bracket, but I was intrigued by something that the Richmond Church of Christ did during that time. They have a list of the 64 songs that they sing, and they have let didn't have to be the people that go there, but anybody could log in and you could vote for the one that you like best. And so they are down to their final 8, and they're voting on them here to the next 2 or 3 days. I thought it was a neat thing. But the final 8 that they are down to is Our God, He is Alive. One of the hardest ones to lead, by the way. Sing to Me of Heaven. There is Power in the Blood. Faithful Love, which is also hard to lead. I'll Fly Away. What about your daddy? How Great Thou Art. Virgil used to lead that one quite often. Paradise Valley. I don't know who sang it here, but that's kind of a tough one to lead as well. And then How Deep the Father's Love. So it was not allowed to participate. They said Amazing Grace was not allowed because they said if you let it participate, then it would just get picked first. So anyway, they were down to the final 8. I thought that was kind of a fun activity. They did that on their Facebook page. Now I'm intrigued as to what will come away as the winner. So I guess they'll maybe sing the winner after they've determined it. So I'd be nervous to do something like that. I'd be afraid it'd be one we couldn't sing. So we'd play the tape up here and everybody can sit here and listen. But anyway, last 2 weeks ago, I guess for some while, we've been talking about the New Testament, various New Testament churches. And I'll have you go ahead and turn to Revelation chapter 3, because that's where we'll be this evening. We have talked about, I turned to John. I guess I turned to the writer, not the actual book. But Revelation chapter 3 is where we will be for the bulk of this evening. And we've been talking about Testament. Now, just to be clear, when we say church, maybe a better term would be congregation. Various congregations meeting in different places. And we've kind of lapped around Asia Minor or modern day Turkey, and we've talked about these different spots and how that each one of them, Jesus had something to say about. And for almost all of them, there was something good. But for almost all of them, there was something bad as well. And I find it unique that when we look at this map, we see these 7 churches, and they're all relatively close to each other, but they're all dealing with completely different issues and situations. I would dare say that the same could be said for Lancaster and Stanford, Danville, Crab Orchard, Somerset. You're all close. But an issue that might arise in Stanford may never rear itself in Somerset. But something that happens in Danville may never happen here. And so the purpose of these books, or these letters in Revelation, is to teach and admonish those people, but also for us as well. And there are lessons in each of these that I think we can all benefit from as well. Tonight, though, will be a very positive lesson. As you can see there, lesson 7, tonight we'll be talking about the church at Philadelphia. And if you look in your Bible, starting in verse 7, which is where we're going to be, the church of Philadelphia is described as the faithful church. And of all the different titles that are on chapters 2 and 3, I would dare say this is probably the one we would hope for, right? I could pass on corrupt and loveless and all of that. But I think the one that is faithful would seem to be the best. We've done this before, and so we'll do it again here this evening. We'll talk a little bit about Philadelphia. The other night, it's been a month or so ago now, we were talking about these places and locations and how many of these were names that came to America. And Boo went home and she texted me that night, rattled off a few, and they were far from recognizable locations, I'll say that. But this is one that is actually a name that most of us would be very familiar with. There is a Philadelphia in Pennsylvania. There are Philadelphias in a lot of different places. It's not uncommon to even see churches named Philadelphia as a name, not because of the location, but more because of the credit that's given to that church in Revelation chapter 3 in a way that other congregations would model themselves as well. Much like Sardis, which was our last stop 2 weeks ago, Philadelphia was an inland city, but an inland commercial city, meaning there was a lot of trade that was happening there. All of these were reasonably good-sized places. These were not little tiny dots on the map. It's in Asia, but it speaks to sort of the overlapping of cultures and who dominated where as to the names that are there. But the name Philadelphia is Greek, meaning brotherly love. You'll sometimes see our Philadelphia in Pennsylvania referred to as the city of brotherly love as well. It was a well-fortified city. It was in a commanding position. It was a place that would have been hard to defeat. And in a place that would be hard to defeat, there are less concerns with the outside, which can sometimes be helpful. But perhaps then that led to some of their sort of faithful description as well. Like the other cities in Asia, it did have numerous temples. It had festivals. It had celebrations of various other gods that were in those cities as well. Again, this is very much an overlapping thing. I think it was Sardis, or it might have been Thyatira a couple of weeks ago when we talked about how that the Persians ruled it and the Greeks ruled it, the Romans ruled it. Well, anytime somebody new comes in and takes over, a lot of their culture is going to sort of stay there with it as well. And so you had a lot of different religious groups that are there. Now, this is a picture from Philadelphia. This are two big gate entryways that are there. But Philadelphia, like Sardis, had been destroyed by the same earthquake in the year 17 AD. If you look on the map, they were extremely close to one another. And we talked more about that earthquake last week. And we talked about how that at Sardis, we maybe said that perhaps that earthquake had kind of done damage to the church. It sort of sullied the church, may have seen a lot of people die, but we don't really see that happen in Philadelphia. So a lot of times we react to things in completely different ways, and perhaps the church does that as well. Despite that, the richness of the land caused people to continue to live in Philadelphia. So people didn't leave even though there was an earthquake. The earthquake did a lot of damage, but there was a lot of positives to being there. 1906 and 1989, San Francisco twice was struck by earthquakes, but there's still a whole lot of people there because there's a lot of positives to being there for business and for trade and for weather. And so if it's a place worthy of staying, the people stayed there as well. Alessa here is the name of the city today. It's not referred to as Philadelphia. And it's the only one that we read about in Revelation with no condemnation, with no rebuke, no criticism that's there. How many of you have multiple brothers and sisters? How many of you ever had a situation where mom or dad came home and they said, you've acted up, you've acted up, you've acted up, but you've been good as gold? Makes you feel good, right? You're like, all right, that was good. I was the good one right there. Well, maybe Philadelphia will feel that way as well. They were the one that was called good. Melvina, I kind of doubt that you were ever the one that was being good at home. So might have used a poor example right there. Johnny, am I right? All right, Johnny quietly is in agreement right there. All right. So let's go to Revelation chapter 7 and find out a little bit about the church there at Philadelphia and what Jesus says to the church. This is Revelation chapter 3, verses 7 through 13. Connie, do you care to read this for us, please, dear? All right. So we're going to look at a couple of things here from this, but you may remember that the scripture reading that Ben read just a few moments ago, Isaiah chapter 22 and verse 22. So put your hand there in Revelation, because if you may not remember it, and let's go back to Isaiah 22 for just a second. That was a pretty easy reading by Ben. It was not very long at all, but it makes reference to something that we will see the same thing said in Revelation. So Isaiah chapter 22 and verse 22 says, "The key of the house of David I will lay on his shoulder. So he shall open and no one shall shut, and he shall shut and no one shall open." Okay? Now, that same thing is referenced by Jesus here in verse 7 of Revelation chapter 3. Jesus quotes Isaiah when he mentions the key of David. What do you think, A, the key of David means? And B, what is the purpose of this reference here as well? Authority. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Well, and that's what it says when it says he who has the key of David. And so it's come down the line there, as so to speak. And so in a sense, that would open the door. You know, if we came here tonight and the door was locked, if we don't have a key, we're stuck, right? We don't get to come in. But when that one person, the magical person, rolls in with the key, then it opens the door for all of us to be there. Why use that reference? Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So when we think about a key, you think about the use of a key. You have a key to your house, right? I don't have a key to your house. You have your key. Why do you not go up to town and pass keys out to everybody to your house? Don't want them in there, right? It kind of loses its my place if that's the case. And so that key that Jesus has in this sort of figurative sense would open up the door. But notice in verse 7, and I might be saying, notice at the bottom of verse 7, he who opens and no one shuts, and shuts and no one opens. What does that mean? The only person with the key is Jesus, right? And so in order for us to get into the building, what do we got to do? We got to be with Jesus, right? We got to be the person that opens the door for us. And then, as Ben said, if he opens the door and we're not there, we're out of luck, right? I'm going to ask a question. I don't know if this has ever happened to you. It could be church. I would think it would be church related because this happens on a Saturday night / Sunday morning. Has anybody ever came to church at the wrong time after daylight savings time? Anybody ever came early or got here late? Anybody ever had that happen before? Well, if you were here at the wrong time, if you got up too early, or if you slept too late because you came in at the wrong time right there, you'd just be in a world of hurt, right? You're just going to have to say, and if you got here and you should have been here an hour early, what might happen when you get here? You may have missed it, right? And the door is locked and you don't have a key and you are completely missing out on it. Can that happen to us today? Absolutely. So in the general sense, it can happen to us and our salvation. But even beyond that, let's assume that we are Christians. What doors might Christ open or shut in our lives today? Assuming salvation, but just in our lives, what doors are opened and shut? Opportunity, absolutely. To do literally anything. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Sure. What other doors might open? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Any others? Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. So on the flip side, other ways that doors are shut in our lives. Mm-hmm. Show something, Tom? Yeah. It's a difficult question not to ask, but to answer, because I would dare say that sometimes doors open and we don't even realize that they open, right? And there may be doors shutting in our life that are open that they go shut. Okay, so there are a lot of ways that you can kind of think about this. I know maybe it's a bit existential on how I'm asking it, but the idea of there are things that are happening in life. Do you believe that there are things and opportunities that present themselves in your life? Yeah, I think so. But often that appear right in front of us. Sometimes we're looking for other things, or sometimes we don't want to see a door open, or sometimes we pry open a door that maybe has been shut. And so this sort of, this sort of allegory or this sort of description of what it would be is something that we can perhaps see. I wanted to see that for 22. Let's look here as well as 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 9 and 10. Leland, can you read this for us, sir? Okay. Now, this verse or these two verses that are that we're looking at here, you are not hearing these for the first time, I'm guessing. 2 Corinthians chapter 12 and verse 9, he said to me, "My grace is sufficient for you." This is Paul writing. What is Paul writing about here? Yeah, he's dealing with the thorn in the flesh. And I think Paul is in many ways writing or talking the way we would talk, in the sense that it would, whatever this thorn in the flesh was, whatever this difficulty was, whatever this maybe jammed open door that he'd like to see shut was, Paul is asking God to do what with it? Remove it. But the response is not Paul would have wanted, right? What did Paul hope to hear said to him? I'll take care of it. It's gone. But what is the answer that he got instead? My grace is sufficient for you. For my strength is what? Made perfect in weakness. What is he saying right there?
People know for sure this ain't you, Paul. They know it's me because of your weakness, because your infirmity, whatever it may be. This way I get the glory and not you.
Mm-hmm. What else? What else do you think of when you read this verse? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I might can do this and can do this and can do this, but I can't do this, right? And so he goes on then to say that therefore most gladly I will rather boast in my infirmities. I will take pleasure in my infirmities, in my reproaches, in my needs, in my persecutions, in my distresses, all for Christ's sake. None of these things in this sentence are fun. None of those things are good. None of those things are, you know what, Leland, if I could get a few more infirmities here in the next couple of weeks, it'd be really good. Have you ever said that? Nobody's ever going to say that, right? But Paul is in a sense saying that because what he'll say later is for when I am weak, what? That makes him stronger, right? It makes him, and he's, in some ways you say, okay, well, what does this mean? Well, let's go back to Revelation chapter 3 and look at verse 8. It said in verse 8 that the church at Philadelphia had little strength. Had a little strength. But they have kept my word and have not denied my name. What does the little strength suggest about their situation? Might not have many people. Might not have much money. Might not have had a good preacher. Answers are getting personal now. Go ahead, Ben.
I said it's like David in the Bible. They're little bitty things trying to do this great big work.
Uh-huh.
This huge stick.
So whatever the little strength that is mentioned right there, how many of us will sometimes grasp on and make a big deal about our little strength? How do we do that? Now, I don't mean necessarily in the church, but even in life. How do we sort of emphasize our little strength? Maybe. That's actually the exact opposite of what I was thinking. I was thinking more along the lines of, oh, we can't do that. Don't have the money, we can't do that. Oh, well, we would do that, but it would be better if we had 40 people here. Then we probably can't do it with 30, right? We can do it. Do churches do that sometimes? Why? Right. Meaning
they see all the things they do, they say, we're just nobody.
Right.
We can't do that.
Right.
As long as you see yourself as nobody, you'll always be. And there's a difference between being humble and just putting yourself down unnecessarily.
So even you may be limited as to what you are capable of doing. But what does verse 8 at the end say? Even for you who have little strength, what does he say? Have kept my word and not denied his name. Is that a compliment to the church? What did it say at the beginning, above verse 7 about the church of Philadelphia? The what church? The faithful church. It didn't call them the big spender church. It didn't call them the greatest. We got 500 preachers to go out and do all. It didn't call them any of that. So they were faithful. And they were faithful with what they had. How can a church remain faithful today, a congregation remain faithful today, a Christian remain faithful today, even when weak? And you can make weak mean whatever you want. Don't make excuses. Rely on, lean into God a little bit. Absolutely. What else? Mm-hmm. Right.
Focus on the mission, let God take care of the
was capable, but far from great. He didn't handle it great all the whole time, right? There were mistakes that were made along the way. And if we're trying to do something, if we're trying to do some kind of task or some kind of service, some kind of deed, if you are teaching for the first time or you are doing anything for the first time, are you going to do it perfect? Just about every Sunday, when I come down from there, I look at my paper and I see something like, I didn't really mention that, right? Well, if I did it perfect, I guess I would, but we're always going to make mistakes, right? We might say the wrong thing. I definitely know if it's a first or a second in the Bible, I'm going to get that wrong on the slide. I can almost guarantee you that. But when we think about what we can't do, it can overwhelm what we can do. It's 26 people here tonight. Be nice if there's 52, but I'm glad it's 26 rather than 13. But whatever the number is, let's do what we can with it, just like they did at Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Sure. I like the last one that you said right there too, because sometimes we look at this, we say, well, I'm not ever going to be the preacher. You know, I'm not ever going to be the song leader or fill in whatever blank it is. But it doesn't have to be a task or a physical service type thing. What you mentioned, just being kind and polite, have a good word for everybody. I'm always impressed every time we come here, and she won't want me to say it, but Maria, I think, stops at every pew and talks to everybody. And and every time I hear something at church, Maria's going and doing this with this person or with that person or with that person or with that person and helping out other people. And I don't mean to embarrass you or anything like that. But you might say, well, no, Maria didn't lead singing. You know, she didn't preach. She didn't, put a new roof on it. It doesn't have to be physical things. Just small things. Because everybody in this building feels a little better after Maria comes to their pew. And there's examples of lots of folks that do that, both in the building and outside of the building as well. Absolutely. And I'll say that about a lot of our older folks as well. When we're out for a week or two, or weather or illness, it makes you feel good just seeing people. I know I feel good seeing Virgil on Sunday morning when he comes in as well. Let's go a little further. 1 Corinthians chapter 16 and verse 9. Lucille, do you care to read this one, the one up here at the top? This is Paul writing to the people in Corinth, and we'll drop down and read Colossians 4:3. Sue-Ann, can you read that one on the bottom? So we see Paul here using this door analogy as well, and we can all relate to what that would be. What's the significance of the open door? We already talked about this a little bit, but the open door that no one can shut in verse 8 of Revelation 3.
It's like when the lottery ticket gets to go.
Uh-huh.
Like that, he told them in the council, this is God, you're not going to be able to stop it.
Absolutely.
Once God determines something, it doesn't matter what.
Jesus talking, I have set before you an open door, and no one can shut it. Now, do we sometimes want to shut the door that Jesus has opened for us? Sometimes we do. We can't do it, right? According to this, we can't do it. So if we can't shut the door, might as well walk on through it, right? Our basement door, outside basement door, we have what would you say, Mary? A 4.5 foot crawl space. It's just enough to be awkward when you're down underneath it. 5 foot crawl space, and there's a door. And they clearly when they built it, they've sawed off the door. But instead of sawing it off to where the handle will be at the top, the handle's at the bottom. So you got to bend. I guess you're practicing for being inside. You got to bend over to get it, and then you got to go in. And that door, when we first moved out there 10 years ago, was hard to shut. Now it's impossible to shut, but these feet do it every time. I just start kicking it now. So the door is, and there have been times when I went out there to mow and the door's been open, right? And when you think about a door, sometimes you want it shut, right? But it's open. You gotta go. And the time 2 or 3 times I went out there mowing and it's been open, I've had to go in because who knows what's going to be in here? Some kind of animal or a human animal, one or the other. But we'll go in there and it's like, what are we? But sometimes we're afraid of open doors, and we're afraid of what we might be capable of doing. But the church in Philadelphia said right here, the door's open. You can't shut it. Go through it. Show you have the faith that they had. They didn't have much, but they had faith, and they could go through that door. Do you think this refers to opportunity, salvation, evangelism, or something else? I think so too. Trick question, right? How does an open door apply to opportunity? Mm-hmm. Yeah. What about open door for salvation?
Sometimes it's actually a horrible thing, but they present opportunity.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
We can go set up a tent or whatever, hand out food, pray for people, whatever.
Yeah.
Sometimes opportunities disguise.
Yeah.
Salvation, you could be the worst person
Mm-hmm.
in the history of the world and still that's an open door.
Uh-huh.
If you're on your last leg, you've been a bad guy for 8 years, you have an opportunity to be saved at that point, and the door is swung wide open.
Right. We sing the invitation song some, who at the door is standing, right? And actually that's used in a couple of different songs. Not why keep Jesus waiting, knocking at the door, etc. Let's go a little further because we've got a little bit behind on things. But we read in verse 9, it's not the first time that we read it. I kind of referenced it. I look at it a little bit more right here. But in chapter 3 and verse 9, along with what we read about the church at Smyrna as well, Smyrna was chapters 2, verses 8 through 11. But it makes reference or mention to what they call the synagogue of Satan. Now, a couple of things. A synagogue is a Jewish place of worship. So when you see that word, it's not exactly the same, but it would be the way that you would make reference to I go to church down on Main Street. And so the synagogue of Satan is referenced. And in short, it's a group of unbelieving Jews who were persecuting Christians. Now, when I say unbelieving, I mean that they were not followers of Christ. The Jewish people had spread throughout the whole area. But as we talked about numerous times, a lot of the early Christians, many of the early Christians were Jewish. And so these would have been people that they would have known, they would have been in contact with, they would have maybe grown up with. But they were persecuting Christians in different various kinds of persecution. Most early persecution came from the Jewish community. So the Christians in the early days of Christianity, it was Jewish people that were persecuted. And essentially they were mad because people were leaving one and going to the other. Now, it wasn't just mad. There was a belief that they were following Messiah that the Jewish people did not believe actually was the Messiah right there. We talk a lot about Rome, and we talk about how when Jesus was put to death, it was Roman soldiers. But Rome had little genuine concern for a lot of these debates between Jewish people. As long as they were fighting each other, they weren't fighting Rome, and they didn't have the power to do much anyway. And so Rome just kind of left it alone, and y'all deal with it. When Jesus started, when the word king started appearing above Jesus, that's when Rome got a little bit involved right in it. This is a little small, so just bear with me. But while Christians were considered a sect of Judaism to start with, it was not its own separate thing, but a sect of Judaism, they were exempt from the required observance of certain aspects of Roman state religion. When we talk about these various places that had these gods and they had to worship Caesar and stuff like that, A lot of the early Christians were exempt from that. We know what it means to be exempt, right? On your taxes, you may be exempt from certain things. You don't have to do whatever that might would be. However, as Christians were expelled from synagogues and denounced by the Jewish leadership, so the Jewish people who had been okay with Christians coming into synagogues. Think about it. When Paul went to all these places, where did Paul go preach every time? Synagogue. And Paul was Jewish, but he's becoming a Christian. I guess we could call him a Christian, I guess you could say. But he was allowed to go into the synagogue. But it was all right if he came in there and talked for a little bit but left. But when he came in there and talked, and about half the people went with him, that becomes a problem, right? And so the Jewish people then started to change things. They were starting to denounce the Christians. And Rome started to see Christianity as a new religion that did not have these same exemptions. And so these Christians that were arising at this point, now Rome is looking at it and saying, oh, could be a problem, could be an issue. And so that left Christians outside of the protection of both the synagogue and open to Roman persecution. So when we think about the earliest days of Christianity, it actually wasn't too bad in its earliest days. It got a little bit worse once they were not on either side. So when I talk about Christianity emerging from Judaism, that's kind of why I say that, is because while it was under the sort of Jewish flag, wasn't awful, but then when it gets too powerful, now you're being treated poorly on both sides. In this case, Jews were persecuting those who believed in Jesus the Messiah. Many of those persecuted were Jews and still held aspects of the old law. We've talked about this. Remember when they all went back to Jerusalem, Paul and Peter and all, they go back to Jerusalem to sort of sort out the issues, right? And they came up with a plan like, you don't worry about the circumcision. Don't worry about the food. If you want to do it one way, you do it the other. None of that really matters. But you can write that on paper, but not everybody always agrees with it. And so Paul used the distinction twice, the synagogue of Satan. I'm sorry, I should say this. Paul used the distinction twice in Romans. Not all who are descended from Israel are Israel. And then also, for he is not a Jew who is one outwardly, nor is circumcision that which is outward in the flesh. But he is a Jew who is one inwardly, and circumcision is that which is of the heart, by the Spirit, not by the letter. I say that for a couple of things. I think that's the end of it right there. But it said, not all who are descended from Israel, not all, just because you were Jewish didn't make you Christians. And so these distinctions can be confusing. And if you're into the sort of religious history, you're maybe more interested than others. But it's, I think, easy for us to sort of say, Jesus died, Christianity existed. But it was a long process. And it was people sitting right beside each other in the synagogue, not unlike you're sitting right beside each other right now, who didn't necessarily always see eye to eye on the same kind of thing. And so when he makes reference to the synagogue of Satan, he's sort of talking, we talked about it in a different way when we talked about Smyrna, but he's making reference to the synagogues who have been just, instead of accepting the Christians and maybe accepting Jesus there in the process, there was a divide or a break there between them. Let's go a little further. We've got to finish up, and we're just about done. James chapter 1 and verse 12. Mel, can you read this one? All right. Verse 10, read there just a second ago when we read the whole thing. What does it mean to be kept from the hour of trial? Say, I'm sorry, man. You'll be. I also will keep you from the hour of trial, which shall come upon the. Wonder what the hour of trial that'll come across the whole world do? Judgment. But they'd be kept from it, right? They would be spared from it, and that would be comforting. To know. So, is this protection from suffering, or preservation, or perseverance? How you want to use it through it? All right. Uh-huh. So on earth, probably no protection from suffering. But what about when the hour of trial is over? Well, there's protection from suffering there, right? Because there's no tears in heaven, right? So I think it could be both, but it depends on how we look at it, right? Now, preservation through it. Could it be that? How are we preserved through the difficulties of life, through the suffering? The promise of when I'm weak, then he is strong, right? That he can help pull us through it. But only if we what? Only if we persevere, only if we're connected to him right there. So the perseverance connects us to the promise of what Mary said there just well. That he who promised is faithful. Verse 11, these are the last couple here, I think. The command, hold fast to what you have in verse 11. How does that look? It says, behold, I'm coming quickly. Hold fast what you have, that no one may take your crown. How does that look like in practical terms? Because you don't have a crown that you're wearing in here tonight.
You got to stand up and stand firm in what you do. If you waver, if you give it in, then they can take your crown if you give it to the spot. You can be led straight through the eyes.
Our crown is figurative, not literal, but it can be removed, right? The crown, in a sense, is what will get us to heaven, right? But without that, if we lose it, then we won't. What helps you stay spiritually steady? Studying the Bible. Mel. Prayer. Coming to church. And we've talked about this. I think I maybe even preached about this one time. But that answer doesn't have to be the same every time. There might be seasons of life where the prayer cup has to be filled a little fuller. But there might be seasons when the coming to church needs to be filled a little bit fuller as well. And so all of those things, it doesn't have to be the same thing every time. It may be more or less depending on what our situation is. Yes. Uh-huh. 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 Yes. Around the table. Absolutely. Go to verse 12, Revelation chapter 3 and verse 12, real quick as we wrap things up here. It says in Revelation chapter 3 and verse 12, and a reminder, this is after a couple of verses of challenge and difficult and perseverance and suffering. It says, he who overcomes, I will make him a pillar in the temple of my God. When you see the word pillar, Pillar, what do you think of? Support, strength. I think of those two things in the picture of Philadelphia right there at the beginning. I find it interesting that when I was reading about the city of Philadelphia, the ancient city, that earthquake pretty much took down everything. Those two pillars were still standing there, right? But the pillars were still standing. You go look at an old house somewhere, and it'll be caving in on the back side, on the front side. But those big columns out front will stand there about longer than anything, won't they, right? And so what he's saying here, and what the imagery that's used, what does that communicate to us about security and permanence? What does a pillar communicate to you? You're going to be a pillar. You're going to be made a pillar of okay. Say it again. A rock, yes. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Yep.
God will put you in his church, and you will be integral part of the church. You cannot be removed.
Right. Yep. It absolutely should. And everyone is a pillar. And we've said it, I don't know how many more different images I can use of it. But if you go home tonight and you take one of the pillars down off of your porch, or one of the rails off of your stairway, the going upstairs, what'll happen? Will it be weak? Right there, it'll fall. The whole thing will fall with just one thing removed. So everybody plays an important role. Yes, pillar bears the load, and we all can have that as well. Any questions? Yes. My pillar of stone. Next week we'll talk about vomiting. Everybody excited? All right.